everyone. Welcome to our panel. It's so great to have everyone here. I'm Catherine Martinez de Leon, and I'm the Director of Events for the LA chapter of the Children's Media Association. And I will be your host tonight, along with my lovely events coordinator, Danielle Fahey, who's going to be co-moderating with me. So before we kick off tonight's panel, which we're very excited about, and we'll introduce our panelists as well, I want to take a moment to reintroduce CMA, both for the benefit of our panelists, as well as those of you who might be new to our organization. CMA exists to connect the dots between across kids and family media. That we all come from different disciplines and mediums. We are a community of makers, thinkers, and innovators. We believe that by learning and playing together, we strengthen ourselves, our community, and content for kids. We have chapters in New York, in LA, and in San Francisco, and we have virtual members all around the world. And we believe CMA is helping to build the future of our industry. Also, CMA is run entirely by volunteers like Danielle and myself. And we already have a great team working behind the scenes. And we're always looking for more members to get more involved. So if you're interested in becoming a volunteer with us, please let us know, contact us. We also post open positions on the website. And as a reminder, your CMA membership, along with wonderful panels like this, offers many benefits and perks. Our job board, our video library with past panels, our member discounts, our mentorship program, and additionally workshops. So make sure to always track what's going on with us. We always like to provide as much as we can to all our members. So just always check the monthly emails, check the website, see what we have going on. So tonight we are joined by two amazing and incredibly talented educational consultants, which I know go by many names. We're titling educational consultants, but who are both very active in the field of education and media, and kind of meet at that intersection. So much of our purpose as children's content creators is to help create that connection between education and creative. So it's really important for people like Emily and Autumn to exist, to understand how to kind of connect those dots. And their experience definitely lends to that. So both of them have experience across many different amazing titles, many different companies. They have a strong passion for education and children's content creation. And we're so excited to speak with both of them about what they've done and to talk a little bit more about what it means to be an educational consultant, as well as what it takes maybe to become one. And so now, let me introduce both of our panelists. We have Autumn Zitani. Autumn is a senior producer at Sesame Workshop, working in both the production and curriculum and content departments. She has been with Sesame for over 15 years and is responsible for executing the overall direction of Sesame Street, as well as managing the development and implementation of Sesame Street's whole child curriculum. Behind the scenes, Autumn reviews, creates, and integrates educational and developmentally appropriate content across Sesame's workshop media platforms, such as television, digital media, and social platforms. And she received her master's degree in developmental psychology from the Teachers College at Columbia University. We also have Emily Helfgot. I feel like I always struggle with your name, Emily Helfgot. Emily has 25 years of experience working in education and children's media as a teacher, educational consultant, and as a creative collaborator. After teaching elementary school in Oakland and then supporting new teachers at Columbia and NYC, Emily combined her background in education with her love of narrative and production in the field of educational media. She served as the educational director on the electric company that are known now as Sesame Workshop. And, electric company by Sesame Workshop.
At Sesame Workshop. Yep.
Got it. And Odd Squad with Fred Rogers Productions, as well as the VP of Learning for Flocabulary, a 6-12 platform that uses educational hip hop to engage students and increase achievement across the curriculum, which is so cool. Emily is currently freelancing full-time for a variety of clients, including Peacock, HBO Max, YouTube Kids, Peanut, 9 Story, Brain Pop, and Tinkergarten. Amazing. So thank you both for joining us tonight. We're so excited to speak with you about what you do and how you do it. So before we get started, I want to remind everyone tuning in that we're going to reserve the last 10 to 15 minutes for Q&A. So definitely as we're going along, keep those questions coming in. You can type them either in the chat or if you're viewing on LinkedIn, you can also type it in there, and we'll be referencing those by the end. So yeah, without further ado, I think we want to start off the conversation with you both, discussing what exactly is an educational consultant. As I said before, we know they go by many names. We know that it means different things to different people. But I think coming from someone who doesn't necessarily work like day to day with an educational consultant, how would you guys, I guess, summarize what does that mean? What does that title mean? What kind of titles kind of also fall into that umbrella? What does the typical day kind of look like for, say, an educational consultant?
Autumn?
You want me to go first?
I do.
Okay. So an educational consultant. So what's interesting is that most of my career is at Sesame Workshop. But what's been great is that from the very beginning, I was working on all different kinds of media. So going in and working on toys, packaging, apps, publishing, anything you could think of, which really gave me this foundation. And it's reviewing any of the educational content that either exists or creating educational content, creating a curriculum that something might be working towards or working with. So it's always different based on what project you have. My job then evolved into becoming a producer, which is so interesting because I feel like Emily and I have now like kind of morphed into that same kind of role where, my passion really became content creation, but my first passion is education. So being able to like blend those worlds together is amazing because you get to be an educator and a creative at the same time. So for the show specifically, like my day to day, at the very inception of like the idea of like, this is what the season's going to be about. Like I'm part of a team that gets to work on figuring out the curriculum seminar. Who are the advisors we're going to work with? What is the curriculum we're going to teach for this season? And figuring out what are those goals? What do we want children to come away with at the end of the season? And then I work really closely with the head writers and all the other creatives, the producers, and it's awesome because I get to work from that very idea all the way through like on set, in post-production. Like I'm there every step of the way until it's, out the door and on Max and PBS.
It is great that Autumn and I both get to live in that creative land and the educator land. And I will say, I think that's pretty rare. And I think it takes some time of, in my experience, staying in that education lane for a bit before you kind of are allowed to cross over into the creative, because it's quite a binary in many environments, I think. So I describe what I do as being like I have a foot in creative and I have a foot in education, and I'm kind of a translator from one side to the other oftentimes. So if I'm on a show, I'm helping to tell writers, this is how a first grader would learn about fractions. But at the same time, I'm maybe helping also to tell educators, this is a way that you could use this type of resource show in your classroom or in an educational setting. So I'm a kind of conduit between those two audiences. That I think is pretty accurate. And you asked something else. Oh, a typical day, I would say, especially since I've gone full-time freelance. I was at Sesame Workshop also working on the electric company, though, not Sesame Street, for 5 years. And then it was more of an office job. But now as a full-time freelancer, I would say 25% of my time is meetings, conversations, collaborations with whoever the current clients are. 25% is review. And review means for me, like looking at outlines or hearing a pitch or going through a first draft. And then I'm noting those things and giving that stuff back to whoever created it. I also look at rough cuts, which is one of my actually favorite things to do, and give feedback on things that changes I think that could benefit the episode or whatever it is that we're talking about. So like 25% conversations with people and projects, 25% review, 25% hustle, for sure. Just in terms of like, I've been very lucky in that I've had a steady flow of things come to me, but that dries up at times, and so there's a lot of just a lot of networking, and then whatever math is left. What am I at? 75%. Whatever is left is I would say combination of rearranging the furniture in my apartment, because that's what I do when I'm here as a freelancer, and like doing the suite of word games on the New York Times website. I feel like that's a really accurate, if I'm being totally honest, picture of what it is. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like that's the life of a consultant, right? Is kind of like networking, getting your work, but also filling the time.
Yes. And I should say, like, akin to what Autumn said about being able to see, it's not just a show, it's outreach, it's books, it's marketing, I've done a lot now with in-school, like vocabulary as an in-school product. I've done TV, that's the bulk of what I've done. And then podcasts now I've worked on a few of those. So I am in different types of media.
Got it. And I was curious, I know you guys touched on this in the beginning, circling back. You guys, now really kind of straddle that line between education and creative. Did you guys, when you originally came in, obviously you were more focused on education, given your backgrounds, but did you always have that kind of yearning to maybe get a little more into the creative? Because I know you, like you said, oftentimes you'll start off in one lane, especially with education consulting, and stay in that lane, prove you can do it, and then maybe move over. Did you always have that inclination? Is it something you both felt you kind of fell into, or?
I think I kind of fell into it because I didn't know at the time that I could do both. So when I first started, it was very much like curriculum and research were in part of the same group, and you stayed in your lane, even though we worked with the creatives and worked with research. But it was kind of like, you do this part of the job and you do this part of the job. And it was kind of like sharing of information, but it wasn't as much like a collaboration of that. I felt like I could give my ideas and really be heard, or I could be like, oh, I think the line would work better this way. Like, it also depends on what kind of head writer you're working with, or writer, or like, some directors like you to be right next to them and give them notes like during the whole show, and they really appreciate your feedback, and some directors don't want you to look them in the eye. Like it all, it's very like, I love that Emily is shaking her head. Yes, it's like we're just like we're very much like we're constantly just working with different personalities and managing relationships. I would say a huge part of my job is managing relationships, and especially because we toe that line. So it's like I'm working with the educators, I'm working with the producers, and then I'm sharing the information back and forth, and we're always constantly trying to find the middle ground. Sorry, I feel like I veered off the topic of what your original question was, but but then it's like this, it's like, I always say it's like a marriage. Like we're trying to constantly figure out like how to make something educational while at the same time you want it to be entertaining. But we know that we have to teach something at the same time, but if it's not entertaining, kids aren't going to watch it. So there's like a middle ground that you're trying to find. So it's a lot of flexibility, and it's just a lot of, like compromise and, figuring it all. We're always constantly figuring it out together. But just like Emily, like I didn't start there. Like it took me a long time. It also, I think in the world of creatives, I don't want to generalize, but like it took a long time for me to be seen in any other way but an educator. Like it took me a long time. Like I know it says I've been working at Sesame like 15 plus years, but I think I just hit like 20 years. And I've only been working as a producer for like the last 3-4 years, even though I was probably doing a lot of the job of a producer, but was never seen as a creative or somebody who could be at the table in that capacity. So it is really rare. But like if you get to do this kind of job where you can have both, and then you can also kind of feel like your world is a little bit more open. Like I mean, listen, I love thinking about curriculum all day, every day. But like also like, like I also want to have fun and laugh and like make fun content for kids that they're really gonna enjoy, so
Yes.
And like you said before, you're in the room, right? And then you're still like soaking up all that, even if you're in like not the creative lane, it only benefits you further down the road is that you've been in those conversations and you've been in one lane, but you were right next to the other lane.
Oh yeah, I was like creative adjacent for the majority of my career.
Which I would say, I mean, it's like looking in a mirror, which I can say, I feel like creative adjacent can be great and also very frustrating if you're a person who doesn't want to be just adjacent. But I got wonderful advice when I first started at Sesame from my then boss that was just like, you're going to want to jump in there with a lot of creative ideas, and I'm sure they're great ideas. Don't. Be the person who listens and does the job that you are there to do, and slowly, and have patience and slowly get there. And it was the wisest, best advice. And I would say, I worked on Electric Company. That was my first real foray into kids TV. And the two writers who went on to create Odd Squad were writers on Electric Company, and it was through working with them as their educational director on Electric Company that they came to see that I was also a creative, for lack of a better word, right? There's like the preciousness around it is a little hard sometimes. And so when they asked me to come over and be the director of education for Odd Squad, it was like, we want a creative partner, force as part of this too. We know that for you, story and entertainment and humor are paramount. And so you're the person that we want. And so I actually got to be in LA for the whole writer's room. I got to help. I'd be there for the hiring of the writer. Like it was much more of a truly collaborative. And I fought for and got a consulting producing credit on Odd Squad for that reason. But that is it's the slow game. I feel, it's you got to just really earn that, and which makes sense. And I know I had to replace myself. I came to, what was the title at Sesame? I started as a curriculum something, I can't even remember. And then I became the education director. And then I had to hire myself, I had to hire someone to fill the position that I was leaving. And my boss warned me, and he was totally right. A lot of the people interviewing for that gig want to write for Sesame Street, right? And they have some teaching experience, or they have some and you have to really suss out. But you are going to be the person who's saying, we're trying to teach, short vowel E, and in this matrix, it's going to look like this, and you have to talk to teaching advisors, and that's really the gig. And then I feel like you find your people and who say, you don't need to just be in one lane. Like, we want you because you bleed into the other things.
Completely. Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that, because I feel like it applies to so many things, especially in media, that, people are so in a hurry to get to that next stage or become a creative, because that's the most lauded, of the titles is, oh, if you're a creative, that's the center of the universe. But, there's so many roles and so many departments that support the creating of content. And it's you learn so much by just doing, and you learn whatever lane you're in. You never know where the path's going to take you, right? And obviously with you too, it's taken different turns, but you've ended up eventually in a place that you really love.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great. So I guess going off of that, Is there a certain process you guys use when you approach content, as far as like approaching it both with like a creative lens and educational lens? Like, have you found like through your careers, like are there certain kind of techniques and tactics you use? Or I know, Emily, you were mentioning kind of just researching, but obviously that's a big part of what you guys do. But is there anything, I guess, insight you could give to any aspiring educational consultants?
In terms of the process, I would say it really depends on the product, right? Whether it's a show, podcast, whatever it is, and what it is that what their mandate is and what their goals are. Like I came into this field with PBS shows, and that's public money, right? That's going into those shows, and that's Corporation for Public Broadcasting, who has a very clear matrix of this is what you have to deliver on, and we're going to test this with kids, and we want to see gains in this way. That's it, like you're really being held. Your feet are to the fire in an educational sense. I've also worked on shows where people have come to me from a streamer, let's say, or something, and said, "Here's the show. We have a pilot script. We have like our pitch doc. We have some visuals. What can we back into and say that we're teaching?"
Yeah.
And that, I know that it feels like I'm saying something that's like so like such a like little secret, but what I yeah, it is. And what I find though is that like if it's good story, it's teaching something. I mean, particularly in the preschool space where a lot of curriculum is under the social emotional umbrella. Like if it is good story, if it is compelling, it's not hard to find that. And then sometimes it's just me kind of then articulating that and delivering a one-page document that they can show at different pitch meetings to say, and look at what it does for kids. Or sometimes it's me saying, you know what, I will go and now attach what I've said to standards from a certain organization, and so that you have like what looks like a formal, we're checking off these boxes. So it really depends on where they're at and how they come to you. But I really, especially, I've worked now, I have worked in preschool, but I also have worked on a lot of 6 to 9 shows where we're getting into social studies, science, math, ELA, and when you're talking about reading, right, any kind of literacy, it's words, right? And if there's good wordsmithing in a show, in a podcast, you're doing a huge amount in terms of exposing kids to words and hearing them in context. And so I think people have this idea that it's like, but where does it say that we're teaching multiplication from this? And it just doesn't need to be that rigid.
Right. No, that's so interesting you say kind of the 6 to 8 or 6 to 11 like age group, because I think usually when I think of this, I think of preschool, because I think, right, that's originally kind of where it all started. But that's so interesting of you to say that more elementary age group. Are there any shows particularly that you can think of that like would have incorporated that? Because I think, yeah, usually when I think of 6 to 11, I don't think of education. I think of just the narrative.
Yeah. Well, I would say 6 to 9 probably is more my sweet spot, and it's what I love preschool, but my real love is that early elementary. And Odd Squad is the best example. I mean, that's first grade math is really what that's teaching. And I would just say, and then I would love to hear what Autumn has to say about this, but in terms of process, the best thing I've discovered that I can do for a show, especially if it's going to be like we're doing several seasons, a lot of episodes, is to create a writer's Bible that goes kind of alongside a Bible that creatively already exists. That basically says, like for Odd Squad, what I did for the writers is I said, okay, here are all and we knew what the math concepts were we needed to hit because it was a PBS show. And I broke it down into like civilian language. So it wasn't like for educators. It didn't look like that. It was, this is really what we're trying to teach kids. Here's an example anecdotally of what you might see in a classroom. Like it might look like this. Sometimes I'll drag pictures in to say like, this is what it looks like when kids are learning to rounding. It kind of looks like Meatball Mountain is what we ended up coming up with for an Odd Squad episode, like in terms of if you round up or down. But this is the like lingo or the imagery, something that kids will relate to. And I come up with those. And then like when I worked on subsequent, that was the first season of Odd Squad. When I worked on subsequent seasons, I was so familiar with the like zeitgeist of the show and the characters. And I could say like this is something that Olive would do. Like Olive might be a good character for this estimating episode because she's like so into playing it fast and loose as opposed to someone who might be more exacting. So that Bible, that thing that I create and then can like fine tune and add to, I have heard from writers is very helpful.
Interesting.
Yes. Yeah. So I do something very similar. And I mean, I get the benefit of working off of a curriculum that's been going for 55 years. So, so I've always had like a great starting place. But we just keep evolving that curriculum over time and depending on what it is we're going to focus on for that season. So, you know, Emily knows this too. Like, you know, we definitely had many seasons ago where it was like a literacy season, a math season. Like it was very much more those types of academic skills. And then the world of education kind of shifted into self-regulation, executive functioning skills, those being the core skills that you need in order to learn all of these other things. So, you know, whenever we do these kinds of shifts or like, you know, say, you know, creative problem solving, identity and belonging, like we bring in people to help us. So it's, you know, advisors, researchers, academics, preschool teachers, you know, who are like in it, and, you know, and can give us these like anecdotal, you know, moments of what happens in the classroom. And then, you know, 6 months later, that's a show. You know, so we're constantly just like being inspired by what other people are working on and doing. And then, like Emily said, we have to then translate that though for the writers, because we're kind of starting up here and now we have to bring it down and be like, you know, so I make these writers guides that are very much like, okay, here's what the goal is. Here are some story ideas. Here is the language you can use or should use. Here are the things you shouldn't do. You know, sometimes it's just like when I find that sometimes if you give some great parameters, it actually is even more helpful for the writers. Like sometimes if you're just like, write a story about something, like then that's way too broad. But if I'm like, hey, we really need a story about sharing and it would be great if it was these characters and, you know, and I need somebody to get frustrated because we haven't hit frustrated yet. And so it's great. And then they'll come up with this amazing idea on that. So it's like, we come up with the same, so these guides, and then basically like we, you know, then we are the guide with those guides, you know, so then we're with them every step of the way. So they're not just getting like a piece of paper and like, okay, figure it out. So like we're constantly like with the writers, like trying to figure it out. We're in script reviews, we're changing lines, we're figuring it out. And also we are very much held accountable. So like research is such a huge cornerstone of Sesame. So we're constantly working with that group as well. Like, you know, we might have a great idea, but, you know, it might not actually work once we you know, we put it in front of kids. So, you know, we go out, we do a lot of formative testing, you know, as we're scripting out. And then, you know, at the end of the season, going out and doing more summative testing to see if we actually did what we were hoping to do. I feel like I veered way off topic there, but
information out.
Yeah.
You want to fix your thought?
No, I lost it.
I was wondering off of that because you work for Sesame, and it's right. Like you said, such a well-known property, such a well-known show, and there's so many kind of like ancillary areas kind of off of it. Do you also consult along those lines, or do you like work with those like publishing and all those?
Yes. So there are others in my group that we kind of all focus on different areas, but since we've all worked there pretty much, so we've all worked there a pretty long time, that like we can pick up on anybody else's. Because honestly, once you have the core of like background of education and developmental psychology of like, okay, I'm getting in the head of a 3-year-old. This is how they would learn this. This is the language you should be using when you really have a handle on the characters that you're working with. So like, Elmo is 3.5 years old. He's going to talk like a 3.5-year-old. He can only do things that a 3.5-year-old can do. Like that's the character. And then you have, then you have a Cookie Monster, and then like that character. So you can be in that mindset. Like I can review a book and give notes, even though it's not, I'm not working on the show. Like I can still, you can still use your skills in many different ways. So don't ever feel like, oh, I want to be an educational consultant. Like it has to be for television. Like it can be for so many different things, and throughout your whole career. Like, don't just feel like, oh, I'm going to go into publishing and I'm going to get stuck in publishing and do that. Like you really can like use that elsewhere. And then we also have a creative development team. So I do work on a lot of these other shows that, they're developing. And I very often, will get something like an idea, and then it's like, okay, so now what are we going to teach? And sometimes like we can't just do a social emotion, or you can't just do a problem solving. Like, they really want to push it. Like, we really want, and I'm like blanking, but like say a math show, like really want a math show, and you get this idea and you're like, okay, well, I'm going to have to change 75% of this idea to make it a math show. But somehow you come out and you have an amazing math show, so it's like, so it's the same kind of thing. So it's either like we're starting with the curriculum, which is very much Sesame Street, the show, or sometimes when things are in development, like you're getting, that department, they're getting pitches all the time of like great ideas. And it's like, okay, well, what could we do at the workshop to make it educational for whatever age group we're working with. But my sweet spot is preschoolers. So Emily, we should team up, and then
we need to go into business. Thank you so much. Thank you for hosting this so that we could come to this realization.
My pleasure, guys. All I do is connect the dots. What we do.
Right? That's CMA. That's us, right?
Yeah. Exactly. So Emily, off of that, given that you consult, and obviously you have mentioned before, you work in a lot of these different areas. Was that kind of part of the reason for your departure of like kind of sticking to one show, or just kind of allowing you to work in multiple areas, be like beyond series? Or I was curious about what spurred that.
Well, I worked on Odd Squad, and then Odd Squad stopped being made, so that was a little bit out of my control. Okay. And then that's when I went back to kind of more my classroom roots with vocabulary, which was really a wonderful midway point, because it was, I don't know how many people listening know what vocabulary is videos, right? But they're like very high production value, not like, oh my God, I can't believe that they're saying this is hip hop, but like with true beat makers and lyricists and, work and amazing visual components of the videos. And then being able to say like, here's this amazing, compelling art, and how can I help you, fourth grade teacher, figure out how to best use that to help teach science to your kids. So I got to do that for a while. And then, there are some times that I wish I was still on one show. When I was on Electric Company, I had a very similar gig to Autumn in that I was on set. I was, and just as a sidebar, the whole like interpersonal thing is really, it is not just let's give a shout out to soft skills. It's a real thing. That interpersonal, like I didn't have a total grasp on just how important being able to read people and the room and situations was in this line of work. Like when I was on the set for Electric Company, I found that my way in was to like, to make fun of myself, to be self-deprecating, so I would go up to the director and be like, I know, it's me again. And like, that was a wonderful take, but like it was a little snotty the way that he said the thing, and we just don't want the attitude of it. So can we do it again? And that kind of knowing when to hold in an edit, I'd be sometimes in the edit suite with the executive producer looking at cuts, and she's like, I know we have to teach that this many, dimes makes 30 cents, but we're on this, I'm dying here looking at these 3 dimes. Like, how much longer do we have to stay on this? And our ability to go back and forth and say, okay, here we're going to do it a little longer, here we'll do it shorter, we'll make sure to put a really great pratfall right here so that we're kind of like keeping the energy up. So just being able to, you cannot be like school marmy, high and mighty, like, well, that is not how you teach silent E. Like that's not going to fly here. It's you really, that flexibility is really important, I think.
Yes.
No, that's great insight, truly. All right, so I know we're about halfway through, so I wanted to pass it off to Danielle to lead the second part of our conversation about how you actually become an educational consultant.
Awesome. So I know both of you folks talked pretty extensively about, your experience with different shows that you've worked on and kind of how you combined your love of education and media together for your current roles. I think a lot of people are curious about, how do you sort of land the first gig or land the first opportunity? I know that Autumn, you mentioned that a lot of it is just working on the educational and creative side, and then sort of working towards labeling yourself as educational consultant with the work that you do. But I'm curious as to kind of how you step into that first opportunity, and if you have any sort of advice for anybody who might be interested in this field.
Yeah. Do you want me to start, Emily? So, like many people at Sesame, actually, I started as an intern. And, I came up to New York to go to grad school, and I had met one of the professors who was one of Sesame's math advisors. And he was like, oh, but that's so interesting that you're interested in children's media. I advise on, Sesame Street and Blue's Clues, and, I could get you in for an interview. And I was like, oh my God, like this is amazing. This it was kind of like all the stars were aligning. And I was like, absolutely, I would love to. And, I went in, I didn't even get any credit for it in grad school, but and I'm not saying anything about the program at Teachers College. I love the developmental psychology program, but I really learned everything I know interning and working. And so when I started, it was very much just like curriculum and research. I quickly learned that I didn't like doing the research. I liked going out with the kids, like that part I loved, but I realized that I'm not a numbers person. I like the research department to tell me what those numbers mean, and then like how I can make something better. And then I can work on that part creatively. So I kind of then veered more towards the curriculum side and working strictly with curriculum. And then I did some, freelance work and whatnot. But then a position opened at Sesame that was like a coordinator in the products department. So like nothing that I was really intending to do, but it was my foot in the door. And anything that has educational content, the curriculum department reviews. So I was still connected to that group, that kind of thing. And when a position to open, I went over to the curriculum department. And then like I said, like I was working on lots of things that were really great and really fun. But I just fell in love with working on the show and like how you make television. I just find so fascinating. And like, I love to watch television. Like that's like, if it could be a hobby, it's my hobby, so like I really so then like I fell in love with that part of it. And so I always say like my biggest advice is like, oh, now the dogs are freaking out, sorry, is like, wherever you are in your career, all right, like if you can interning is great. Doing informational interviews, just learning about what people do is super interesting. And then you're like on people's minds when, a position might open. You never know. Meet as many people as you can. Go to conferences. CMA, I think, is amazing. Like to be able to like all these connections and the, you know, these kind of talks that you can go to, or now like you could stream, you know, just, or the mentor program, which I did. Emily, I don't know if you've been involved in it at all, like for CMA, which was also amazing. And I was like, oh my God, I wish I would have had this when I was like up and coming, just to like get some information and meet tons of people. Conferences are great for educate, you know, you're like, I like to say too, that just because you're an educational consultant, you cannot claim to know everything about education. Like we are also, just like teachers have to like go and get credits, like we are constantly learning along with everybody else. You know, it's great that we get to use all of our background knowledge and stuff like that, but I'm constantly learning about like new things that are happening in the world. So you really got to put yourself out there and like be open to these learning experiences.
Yeah, I think definitely. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just agreeing.
Yeah.
I
was going to say, definitely highlights the importance of networking and just
Oh, yeah.
a lot of test and learn. I think learning about like where your niche is through networking, I think is definitely valuable for sure.
What's cool is our stories are so different actually in this way, because I just always thought I'd be a classroom teacher. I just always thought I'd be an elementary school teacher. And I was an elementary school teacher for like a handful of years. And then I was like, oh my God, I don't like this job. And I don't care enough. I loved connecting with the kids. I loved creating fun projects and, you know, units. And I hated the behavioral management, the classroom management piece. And I hated it to the extent that I was like, I don't even want to be good at this. Like, this is not worth there are some people who are so brilliant at this, and it's not my thing. So then I was left with like, well, I'm not going to be a teacher. What am I going to do? And then what did I do? I taught teachers actually for a while at Teachers College for the Peace Corps Fellows program. So it's folks who had returned from teaching abroad for Peace Corps and wanted to be New York City public school teachers. And we subsidized. That was kind of TFA-like. And we ran a summer institute at TC and then just threw them into the deep end with their own classroom in the fall. And so I worked there for a few years and helped. I was given such an appreciation and love and awe for teachers as a result of doing it myself, that I was well positioned to help advocate for and teach new teachers. And I found that I liked facilitating conversations, and that's a lot of what that was. Mm-hmm. And then again, not to speak poorly about TC at all, but that program, in general, what they're very good at doing there is the traditional track of student teaching and then becoming these alternative certification programs. It's like they weren't the most flexible when it came to the fellows I was working with, where we're like, yeah, great. They should have this theory and they should write this 20-page paper, but at 6 a.m. they have to go and like get on a train to go to their classroom to teach that. Like, it wasn't meeting the needs of the teachers who were just right in it. They didn't have a soft landing, you know, they were right in there. And I found it to be frustrating to work in that environment. And it just so happens around the same time I saw a posting for a curriculum. Again, what was it? A curriculum specialist.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Specialist.
Yeah.
At Sesame. And I was like, okay, this sounds amazing. And my biggest piece of advice in this strand of information is Sesame was known as you have to have a master's degree to apply for a job here. Like, it's vaulted, right? The institution. And my like little secret was I didn't have a master's in education. Like, I'd been a teacher and I then had worked at club, but I didn't have that. And I wasn't even going to apply. And a friend of mine was like, just apply. Like, you have some life experience now behind you that other people wouldn't have to apply. And anyway, I got the job. So I would just say, don't ever let anything that a job description says keep you from applying for it if it's something you really want. because I mean, that really, taking that job is what helped me set sail on this whole new direction and to what I'm now doing many years later. And if I had let that throw me off course or not do it, so I just like to share that with people, even though it means I'm outing myself as not.
Oh my God, I think so differently of you now.
Yeah, I know it. Well, it's the risk for the people. It's the risk that I'm willing to take.
No, but I think that's
has
such
some
great
research,
advice. Yeah.
That is, yeah, agreeing with Autumn. I think you should always go for it. You don't know who else is applying. You don't know what your background, what people are going to see in your background they're really going to identify with.
Yeah.
Just go for it.
Yeah. And I would say that, and then everything just kind of it built from there. Like I said, working with the writers on Electric Company, they then asked me to come to Odd Squad. And then things like what I haven't talked about really at all is Pinna, which is I don't know how many people know that company, wonderful audio kids company. They have like a library of amazing podcasts for kids of all ages, as well as audiobooks. And they hired me to, right before the pandemic, to create a bunch of classroom resources because they knew that teachers were using their podcasts but having a hard time figuring out how to exactly. So they hired me to create a bunch of materials to go along with podcasts. As I was finishing that, everything closed. Oh. And instead of taking consumer and making it for classroom, they were like, okay, little pivot. Now we need you to take the stuff for the classroom and make it that the parent is the teacher. And so it was like, okay. So it gave me the opportunity to create like resources where I could say, if you're in this environment, this is the way that you can do it. If you're in this environment, this is the way. And I say that just to say that's more, I have in my kind of breadth of experience, worked on a bunch of shows that have been wonderful. And then also have this like vocabulary stuff, or Tinkergarten, another organization that I'm now helping to create a series for, where instead of getting together in person to do these classes, people can do them on their own at home. Anywhere that it's not just working on TV shows is, I guess, what I'm trying to say. And if you are coming from a teacher or background, which I guess is probably not most people who would be here, that there are different ways, entry points, that it's not just TV.
Absolutely. I think one follow-up question I might have with that is, did both of you have to sort of specialize in a particular age group when you were starting out, or was it kind of keeping it open in terms of who you wanted to sort of focus on in your in consulting?
Yeah. I mean, I always was in love with the preschool age, and so I knew that I wanted to do that. I mean, I do love nowadays, like especially that the world of like this 5 to 8, 6 to 9, like there's this gap of like great television and learning, like, okay, so what we do at the preschool level, like how do we take it up a notch? Like I find that just like fascinating how it could all kind of just evolve. But since I always knew that it was preschool, that's what I focused on. And then, then landing at Sesame was just like the incredible cherry on top.
And I would say I taught, when I did teach, I taught 1st and 4th grade. And I just, that area and in between, that's, I love the, like, how much they can dig into stuff and the wisdom that's there, but still they're little still. And so, but I also, again, have done preschool because I will go where the work is. But I would say more my area of specialization, is slightly older.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think we tend to think of it as being primarily preschool for educational consulting, but kids of course can learn at any age, and even adults. We're all learning, still learning.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think of like, I work with so many educational consultants, so I can truly say that like if you have a passion for STEM, you could become a STEM consultant. Like you like follow your passion and then like you know enough about that thing and you make a name for yourself. Like and then, then all of a sudden like now I'm working with this professor from Rhode Island who's been working with us on our STEM curriculum for years and years, and like, and how cool is that? Like, she's still a professor by day and she like reviews scripts by night, like how great is that? You really, like don't feel like you have to be like really like pigeonholed. You don't have to love just one thing, but if you do love one thing, then you can like go for it, and then you can get in that niche.
Absolutely. I think kind of a follow-up question to that, is there anything that both of you find to be the most rewarding aspects of your work? I'm sure there's quite a bit.
You're gonna make me go first. I mean, I would say like, because I saw, that this question and, I was thinking about it and it's really hard for me to like nail down. Like, I feel like I've been part of so many amazing things over the years, but like, like what I love is like that I get to be part of something from an idea till it's out the door. Like I'm very proud of being able to do that when I know that not everybody who wants to do this has that kind of opportunity, that kind of thing. But then like, I think of the risks that we get to take at Sesame, and we get to do such cool things. Like we're coming off of like 2 years of identity and belonging curriculum and like, being able to put content in front of preschoolers that, they might not see anywhere else, and being able to like start them on a trajectory of like being good humans. Like I can't believe like I get to be part of that. And that's just like amazing to me. So I think that would be my biggest, that I get to start at the very beginning,
Rewarding. I'm of two minds. One of them is the creative problem solving piece, and like, yes, this is we're trying to communicate this certain idea, and it's and the working really with the writers to try to crack something that's just not there yet. That and there are many little instances of that. But I would also say the rewarding is working with super smart people who really, and creative people who really want to bring kids joy. Mm-hmm. Like honestly, it sounds a little hokey, but I mean, to actually have long, deep, profound conversations where the outcome is going to be, an 11-minute animated show, but the thought that's going into it and it makes you feel good about the world. I think that's a really rewarding thing about it is this talent and these people who could be working on things for grown-ups or are putting their time and effort into things for kids.
Absolutely. I definitely agree. I think that's probably one of my favorite aspects of children's media as well. And I'm sure with you too, Catherine, just I think it's so rewarding because this type of media has such a large impact on children. And I think even the content that I used to watch growing up, I feel like still impacts me today. So it's so important to create something really, really strong and really powerful in that work, for sure.
And such talent that you get to work with, like you were saying, Emily, that it amazes me just like how much when you're watching the creative process, just the thoughts that come out and just almost watching the process sometimes is just as rewarding as seeing the final product.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. Awesome. I think kind of following that too, do either of you have any sort of episode or piece that you created or helped to create that you feel like is probably your favorite or one of your favorites to help consult on? That'd be a broad question.
Oh, that's tough. That's a tough one.
I know we even got this in advance, and it's still a tough one. One of the things that comes to mind, I think, because I'm working now on the 4th season of Odd Squad, which is actually being shot in England. And there was something that made us reference back to the first season. And there was this great episode we did. Math is sometimes very concrete, like fraction, certain little subheadings of math, but also just the thinking strands of math, like knowing what information is important and what isn't, or like knowing how to tackle a problem. Those kinds of broader thinking strategies are a huge part of being a mathematician or, a critical thinker. And so some of the Odd Squad episodes, we also had to do so many episodes, and like, how many can you do about, like odd and even numbers? You run out after a certain amount of time. So we were trying to think about how to think about problem solving, like word problems, and this idea of extraneous information. Don't let that distract you. Like, what is the actual problem you're trying to solve? And the writers came up, and because of a robust discussion we had, came up with this obfusco, like as in obfuscate, but like obfusco was one of the Odd Squad characters, and he talked in like riddles and enigma, and he was like, so yes, the answer you seek is the chicken in the red umbrella. He was hysterical. It made kids laugh because he was very funny, but then he was the one giving these word problems. So it was very rooted in character and humor. But then the idea was, I don't know what he said about a chicken and a red umbrella. That doesn't seem to have anything to do with what we're trying to figure out. So let's take that away. And then he said something about this, and it was just such a mwah kind of moment of marriage of the, like, this is truly like what this skill is. And here's a character who will make kids laugh, but also totally plug them into what we're trying to teach. So
yeah, that's a big win.
Yeah.
I love that show so much. So you made me, while you were talking about that, you made me think of something that, so we had been working on creative problem solving as a curriculum focus. And we had one idea, and we all thought it was awesome, and how we were going to structure the show and whatnot. And we took it out to kids, and it didn't work, and which is very humbling. But then also, it just elicits like so much like creative thinking on our part, then having to work together. And we're like, we have to figure this out. How are we going to do this? And we were in a room, and we brainstormed all these ideas. We came up with a new focus, and this idea about using a chant and, making a structure for the street story like we've never done before, and using gestures to go along with it and all this stuff. And we went out and we rewrote that show and retested it. And then it came back with such great results. And then, we had a season of it. We had another season of it. We've been testing it, and we're getting back like these amazing results from the kids, like actually like going through the creative thinking process after watching the show, actually using the words that, I don't know if anybody's seen Sesame Street lately, but it's this, I wonder, what if, let's try. And, and that kids are saying that on their own, doing the gestures on their own. And it was such a struggle. I mean, like, the performers hate it because it's like very redundant, and it's like you have to say it 3 times, and then you got to say it 3 other times. And like, it's all about repetition, and they hate the gestures and all the thing. And they're like, oh, we're going to do another season of this. And the writers hate it because like, it's very like, structured, and like, they want to be more free and the whole thing. So it was basically like fighting for like seasons on end. But then when like all of a sudden you can be like, oh my God, we actually made an impact. We have like the data to support it, is so huge. And then what's also awesome is then you can be like, hey, Elmo, like, what you're doing is making a difference. Stop fighting with me. We're doing something good. Kind of thing. But yeah, I would say like, as a, like, because this is what's happening with us right now. And I would say that's incredibly, like, I'm very, very proud of that work.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always great to see the positive impact I think that our work creates. It's a very, very rewarding aspect.
So I know we're at our hour mark, and I don't
Yeah.
believe we ended up having any questions from the audience, which is totally fine because this has been a wonderful conversation. I feel like we covered so much ground. I've learned so much. But thank you, Emily and Autumn, for joining us. This has been great.
It was so fun.
Yeah.
And hopefully you'll be involved more with CMA going forward. We'd love to have you again. And to everyone watching, thank you for attending. We'll have a few more panels coming up in the next few months, so definitely tune into those. And like I said, stay tuned for all the events we have coming, both for our chapters and also nationally. All right.
Thanks,
and everyone have a
Thank
good night.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.